Hi, I'm Len Wein, co-creator of Wolverine, and I'm sitting here with the living legend himself, Stan the Man Lee. We're here to talk about the origins of the X-Men and Wolverine and all of that sort of good stuff.
Wow, well, that was a great introduction, and now I'm waiting for you to say the first thing that'll give me my cue to wax eloquent.
Well, fair enough. None of us would be here at all if you and Jack Kirby had not created the X-Men and did handle those first bunch of issues. Tell us how that came about.
I had been doing so many superheroes and getting superpowers, you know, a guy who was the strongest character on Earth, and somebody who could fly, and somebody who could stretch his body, and so forth. The toughest thing is coming up, as you know, with new superpowers. So one day I decided to take the cowardly way out. I figured instead of having to explain their origins and how they got their powers, I'd make up a lot of crazy powers and say they were born that way. They were mutants. No explanation needed, no being struck by lightning or bitten by a radioactive weasel or anything, just they got a power. And lo, the X-Men were born. And that's it. And I have never been more dull in my life.
Well, did you work closely with Jack? You had on so many other projects.
Couldn't have done it without Jack. Jack was the most imaginative person I have ever known. He was not only an artist, but he was a storyteller. And he told the stories visually through his drawings. And for example, when we first created the X-Men, and I said, I want them to be at a school, we'll have a professor. The name of the professor will be Professor Xavier, because I'm so corny. I said, that'll tie in with the X of X-Men. And Professor Xavier teaches them how to handle their superpowers and everything. And Jack brought in the first few pages, and they're all fighting each other, which is a wonderful way to start a story. But I said, what are they fighting about? And he said, no, they're exercising. I decided they should have a room where they exercise. I thought that was great, so we decided to call it the Danger Room. But I never would have done that unless Jack had given me those drawings, you know? So he was the greatest collaborator you could ever have.
Now, as I recall, you had a shorter run on X-Men probably than any of the other books that you and Jack did together. You did Thor for years, you did the FF for 100 issues. Why did you leave the X-Men book?
I can't remember completely, but I think what happened was we never thought the X-Men book was quite as important as the others. Jack only had time to do so many. He was doing the FF and Thor and I think the Hulk or whatever. So I finally got another artist to do the X-Men. And somehow I wasn't as happy working with the other artist, but the book was still selling well enough to keep it going. So I stopped writing it, got another writer, and the book kept going, and I turned my attention to other things, and that's really what happened. And it didn't sell quite as well until a new group took it over, and I wouldn't be surprised if you were part of that new group.
Oh, segues. I love segues.
That's some segue, huh?
Did you expect the X-Men would still be going today, even as a completely evolved and different creature than what you guys created?
I never would have thought that any of them would still be around today or as big and important as they are today. That's really the most amazing thing of all, and the most gratifying thing, of course, and only because the people who took over the writing and the drawing later did such a great job that they not only kept the strips going, but they improved on them as they went along by making up characters like, oh, shall we say, Wolverine?
Wolverine actually was not created initially to be one of the X-Men. That's the
Really? I didn't know that.
No, I created Wolverine for the Hulk. For give him somebody to fight, because God knows you have 12 issues
How could the Hulk fight Wolverine? He could step on him and crush him.
Except he's indestructible.
Oh,
Wolverine.
That's right.
That's how you play it.
Wow.
But no, he became part of the X-Men because there was all that scuttlebutt going around about reviving the X-Men as the international superhero group. So I figured, oh, a Canadian, let's make him a mutant. One of the things that's always sort of bothered me about the X-Men, and I don't think you intended it, but it became the situation, is that your whole idea of, well, if I just make a mutant so I don't have to come up with origins, everyone started to do that. It was simply, I'm a mutant. Okay, that's one panel, we're done, now let's do a story.
Well, speaking of origins, he says, because he realizes that Len has been talking longer than him and he will never tolerate that. So speaking of origins, I think that the origin that you gave Wolverine is one of the most brilliant origins ever and one of the most provocative and mystifying, and it kept the readers on the edge of their seats for I don't know how many years, wondering how did it happen, what happened up in Canada. And I mean, it was just wonderful the way Wolverine almost single-handedly kept people fascinated by that book.
I think part of that is the mystery factor. I think the less you know about a character, the more interesting they are. You know, mysterious women in black are always much more intriguing than the girl next door who you know everything about.
Well, now that depends on the woman, but we can get into that later.
This is a G-rated conversation.
I feel the same
probably.
way about you, you know. I know so little about you that I find you intriguing, and I'm sure as soon as I get to know you better, I mean, will this thing ever end? You know.
Listen, I have spent decades hiding my mutant powers from you. It's not easy to do. I'm all strapped up here to keep the wings hidden. It's not an easy thing. I guess part of the fascination is how these characters have evolved over the years. The fact that Wolverine and the X-Men have taken yours and Jack's creation in a whole other direction. How do you feel about seeing that sort of thing with the X-Men?
Well, the way I feel about it, not only with the X-Men, but with all our characters, when characters have been in existence for so many, not years, for so many decades, the writers naturally feel, I've got to inject a new angle, a new element. I've got to do something to keep the reader's interest up. So they make changes. They kill a character off. They make a character ill. They have one marry another, divorce another, become a drunkard, whatever it is, because they're desperately trying to just throw in a new angle that'll grab the readers, and you know that better than anybody. So I never object to the changes that are made. First of all, I'm not in a position to object. But secondly, because I understand why they make them. And I'd probably, and you'd probably do the same thing. If you were writing the same group of characters year after year, you'd have to say to yourself, I gotta put some surprises in here and some new twists. Now I think I've spoken as long as your longest speech, so I feel better, and now I'll stop and take a break.
You're timing this, aren't you? It's sad. I think there is that element. There's always a natural evolution. I get the question, I'm sure you've gotten it, how you feel about do you feel proprietary towards the characters?
No, I really don't. I really don't. I felt proprietary, as I'm sure you did, toward the characters when I was writing them.
Oh, absolutely.
But the minute you stop writing them, somebody else is writing them. And if that somebody doesn't have the freedom to write it the way he or she wants to, then it isn't fair. It isn't right. No, I don't really have a proprietary feeling about it.
I think we share that. I'm sort of the same way. People ask me that, and I go, I have taken over other people's characters and done things, many of them yours, in fact.
Yeah, and I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Probably not on camera. It's just